Coming to paperback and e-readers, ISIS Legacy. The sorority secrets from the goddess next door are revealed in this all-new ISIS series adventure. Pre-order your copy of ISIS Legacy on Amazon.com today. I was on Facebook this weekend when I saw a post that stated that a man usually knows whether or not he wants to marry a woman within 6 months. Now, there were some men who were upset about this post, but this post was presenting the truth regarding a man who wants to go out here and get married to a woman. Usually a man who wants to get married knows whether or not he wants to marry that woman within 6 months. Unfortunately, many men out here these days don't really understand how relationships work. Now, the reason why so many men don't know how relationships work is because many men grew up in single mother households or divorced households over the last 50 years, and they don't really understand how feminism has completely changed the dynamic as related to relationships and how they are supposed to work. Now, before feminism came in the 1960s, most men had to go through the courtship process. And the courtship process usually went through the father of a home. Now, a man had to, after talking to a girl, had to approach a father to gain his blessing to get involved with that woman. And after they had dinner with that man and the father vetted that man, then they were given his blessing to go out here and have what they called a courtship. Now, usually these courtships went on for at the most 6 months, and by the 6-month mark, that is where either a man either proposed marriage or he just decided to end the relationship. So most men usually knew within 6 months or whether or not they wanted to marry this woman, and they did not want to keep these courtships going on for long because it was a waste of their time. Now, usually the man didn't want to waste his time dealing with a woman who he didn't have any compatibility with, and usually he would try to figure out whether or not he could go out here and build his family and his home with that woman over the course of that courtship. Usually a man, over the course of that courtship, spent his time looking to get to know this woman, and he was looking to see if this woman would be a suitable helpmeet in helping him establish his home, and if this woman would be a good teacher to his children. And he would also look and assess at her values and her character to see if she would be a good person to make his wife. Now, back in those days before feminism, most men followed the Most High, and they understood what the title of wife meant. Now, the title of wife is an esteemed title in the eyes of the Most High, and the title of wife is one where a young girl or a youth graduates into womanhood. It is only when a young girl or a youth becomes a woman once she gets married. That was the standard for womanhood before the feminist culture took over here in America. A woman worked to graduate into womanhood by becoming married. And usually that's why a courtship was important, because a courtship meant that a young woman was going to go from being in her father's house to forsaking her mother and her father to cleave to the man she was going to marry. And that is why the wedding was so elaborate, because this symbolized the woman forsaking her mother and father and then cleaving to her husband. So that was what the marriage symbolized, and the wedding symbolized the woman's graduation into womanhood. But your feminists did not like the whole idea of your woman graduating by marriage, and they wanted to substitute the marriage for a college degree. And as these women substituted the marriage for a college degree, that is how the whole paradigm for relationships changed here in America and the West. And as that paradigm changed, we saw men going from thinking about marrying women within 6 months to a whole new paradigm for relationships and a new substitute title created by your feminist called the girlfriend. Now, the girlfriend is a social construct that came about from about the 1920s and the 1930s as we were starting to change from the concept of a youth to the whole concept of a teenager. Now, most people don't understand that the concept of a teenager was a social construct that was created by Madison Avenue and Hollywood in order to create a new base of consumers. And the whole concept of the teenager was meant to take your children off the concept of a youth who grew up into manhood at the side of a father or a mother, and then have them focused on this whole social construct of being this teenager who was going to go out here and be this big time consumer looking to gain social currency and social acceptance from the institutions of Madison Avenue and Hollywood and corporate America. So the teenager was an American concept and an ideal and a social construct, and the feminists wanted to take that concept of the teenager and use it as part of their whole way of changing the whole idea of relationships and courtship into what we call modern dating. Because before feminism, again, the whole courtship process was done through the father, but the whole dating process was something that girls did on their own. And your feminists wanted to capitalize on this because the further they pulled the father out of the relationship, that meant that the woman could go out here and choose. But sadly, without the father there to be able to supervise the whole courtship process, what happened was many men did not understand that the ultimate goal of a courtship is to lead to marriage. The ultimate goal of a courtship is supposed to be that man choosing whether or not he wants to propose marriage to that woman. But most men don't understand this because Madison Avenue and Hollywood have blurred the lines and have you believing that being a girlfriend is the ultimate goal. But the ultimate goal of a dating, what they call today dating, is supposed to be seeing whether or not this man wants to marry a woman. But that whole goal, again, has been blurred over the last 50 years as feminists have looked for substitute titles for wife, and they're looking for those substitute titles for wife because they don't want to submit to God's natural order, and they don't want to have a man being a head over them. And because they do not want to be under God's natural order and have a man being a head over them, what the feminist wants to do is create substitute roles like girlfriend and substitute situations like living together in an effort to try to avoid marriage, and looks for ways to try to create these relationships that are substitutes because she wants to find a way out if things don't work. Marriage is based on faith, but feminist concepts like girlfriend and living together are based on fear. And the fear is that if this man does not meet her so-called standards, she can go out here and leave that relationship and find another man to be involved with without any sort of commitment or obligation to the Most High God. So that's why these women are out here talking about how they want to be a girlfriend and not a wife, because wife is a title where a woman is accountable to the Most High, and a wife has to submit to the authority of her husband and submit to the authority of God. So in order to avoid dealing with the authority of God and the authority of God's order and the man who is the steward over the earth. What your feminist wants to do is create these substitute titles and then use these substitute titles to have these relationships where she can basically live in sin by being his girlfriend and living together, and not be a helpmeet to a man, but an opportunist looking to gain whatever social status or resources she can from that man. And then if things don't meet her terms, she can then monkey branch over to another man. But many men, they don't really see how this really damages things as related to relationships, because they have grown up in a culture of feminism for over 50 years. And as they've grown up in that culture of feminism, they have learned they don't need to commit to women. And that's why you have so many men who are upset about the whole post that talked about a man knowing whether or not he wanted to marry a woman in 6 months. Because again, the original concept of courtship was about a man meeting with the family, finding out if he was a good fit with that family, finding out if this father was somebody he could work with, and finding out if this girl's values were good. And then if that worked out, he could then court the woman, find out more about her values and her character, and then find out more about her and if she was going to be respectful or cooperative with him. And if he saw that he was going to get respect and he was going to be able to work with this woman and have a relationship with her, then he could go out here and propose marriage to that woman. And then they could go out here and get married, and she could go from being in her father's house to being with her husband, and they could go out here and start building their own home and their own household. But your feminist didn't want to commit to these duties as related to being a wife, and she didn't want to take those responsibilities. So she went out here and tried to create these substitute roles. And this is why so many men out here are confused, and this is why so many men and women are in really dysfunctional relationships that never really come to a conclusion, because the whole concept of courtship, again, was meant to lead towards marriage. But today's boys and girls and men and women don't know this, because they've grown up watching a lot of media telling them that everything is about dating, and eventually you could just go out here and live with your boyfriend. But that relationship is directionless and it has no end. And what happens is that this whole relationship practically goes nowhere. And I've seen that many relationships go on for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And basically the guy is out here with this woman for an extended period of time, and they never really make a commitment. And the main reason why these partners never make that commitment is because they have been miseducated. 1, by your feminists, and 2, a lot of people are filled with this fear of committing because they fear graduating into manhood and womanhood. And many of your feminists and your feminist indoctrinated women, they fear graduating towards womanhood because they fear their own mortality and they want to stay forever young. And because they want to stay forever young in their minds, they go out here and refuse to commit to marriage because, again, marriage is a graduation into womanhood, and it means that a woman has matured and become a full woman. But to avoid becoming that full woman, what some women try to do is create these substitute roles, and these substitute roles are designed so that they can still remain in their youth, in their mind. Unfortunately, as they're trying to stay young, time is passing them by. And as time passes them by, these women don't see that they're getting older. And what's really sad is as they grow old, they never grow up. And many men who are whoremongers, they take advantage of this situation with these women who promote this idea of being a girlfriend and they'll go out here and use these women's bodies until these women start to age out of the entire social marketplace. And that's why we have all of these women who are chronically single, because they don't have a father there to vet these kinds of men, due to the feminists back in the 60s who wanted to choose their own man without having a father in the home, and the institutions of your business not wanting the father in the home because they wanted to gain a lot of money from these women and their impulsive spending habits. But the worst part about this is we have many men who really are miseducated on relationships because there was no father in the home to teach them the role of a man, and no father there to teach them how their role as a steward relates to the Most High God. And because there is no man there to teach them their role as a steward and their role as a man, this is why we have 2 to 3 generations of males out here who learn how to be whoremongers and just look to go out here and use women and scoff at the idea of marriage in 6 months. No, these men, what they want to do is have relationships where they can get lots of sex for years, and then once the woman starts to hit the wall and lose her looks, then they want to discard the woman and replace her with somebody else. And in some cases, if the woman is somebody that they just want to just use and abuse, they'll just use her and then move on to the next one after they have had their way with her. And this all leads to a woman winding up becoming completely tainted, because as she's having sex with these men, they are putting their spirits within her and putting DNA within her to join with her. And as she has all of these spirits and DNA within her, like Black Male Advice TV, aka Ringo, says, that what happens is this woman starts to become mentally unstable. And that is compounded by all of the lies and promises that these whoremongers make to this woman, because they are just using her for her body. But the whole thing is that none of these guys are educated on being a man, and that's why a lot of these men are upset, because they want to go out here and have that girlfriend, because they want to be able to leave this woman and monkey branch over to another woman if this woman winds up losing her looks and hitting the wall, or she just decides that she doesn't want to go along to get along with whatever he wants to do. So a lot of these guys, they don't really understand that the original intention of a courtship, or what they call dating these days, was originally meant to be marriage. But the whole point is dating today has been so made dysfunctional by feminists and whoremonger beta males, is that most men just think of dating as a way to get themselves some easy sex, but never want to commit to this woman as related to a marriage. And this is why so many men are miseducated and misguided, and why so many men don't really understand what dating is about. And I remember one guy on Facebook, he sent me a post telling me about a woman who had been dating a man for over 20 years. And that's really, it made me shake my head, because the whole point of dating that long really shows that this relationship is practically going nowhere. And it really shows what happens when you become miseducated about relationships. Because, again, a relationship is supposed to end in a marriage. And the whole point of the courtship, or what they used to call the dating process in the 50s, was meant to end in a marriage. The ultimate goal of the courtship was to figure out whether or not this woman met the standards a man had for being his wife. And a woman wanted to go out here and meet those standards, because if she did not meet those standards, she would be on the road to becoming a spinster. And that's something most women didn't want to become, because then she would be out here like the feminist, all by herself, living miserable by herself. So many women wanted to go out here and work towards becoming a wife, But because of 50 years of feminism, many men and women are confused about their roles, and they're confused about how relationships work. And as they sit there thinking about being a girlfriend, they never graduate to womanhood or graduate towards becoming a wife. And what's really sad is many men don't understand what it means to be a leader because they've been raised in these single mother households. And because they've been raised in these single mother households, they're looking to be a man to a girlfriend, not the husband that God wanted a man to be to a wife. If you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to pick up some of my men's issues books on relationships, like Why 70% of Black Women Are Single, or The Man Crisis, or The Upcoming Woman Crisis, you can find all these books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them on Smashwords, the iBook Store, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available for the first time in paperback, Why 70% of Black Women Are Single. Learn all the reasons why so many Black women can't find a husband and why 70% of Black women are single. Get your copy of Why 70% of Black Women Are Single on Amazon.com today.